So given you've clicked on this video, you're either a libertarian or an objectivist, or are at least interested in these philosophies. A very legitimate question you'd have in your mind is, what even is the difference between the two? Aren't these both advocates of laissez-faire capitalism? To answer this, let me define both of these terms. Libertarianism, as I'm using it, and as I'd argue, the only legitimate use of the term, is a legal philosophy based upon non-aggression. What does this mean? And why is it the only correct definition of the term, as I am saying that it is? Let me explain. Historically and culturally, a libertarian has been someone who cares about individual liberty as they understood it. It began in France as an interchangeable term to the French anarchists, before being adopted in the mid-20th century by liberals who wanted to defend classical liberalism from increasing state involvement in economies after World War II. What we see here is that people who used the term libertarian throughout used it to distinguish themselves as defenders of individual liberty as opposed to those around him who were for the erosion of individual liberty. What follows is that for a proper definition of the word, we need a proper definition of individual liberty. So what does individual liberty mean? It means to respect the fact that an individual is a sovereign being, independent from others around him, that his mind, his soul, his body is his alone, and from his very nature, from the type of thing that he is, a rational being, he has certain conditions of survival, namely, that he be free from the use of physical force, because to use force against a man is to make him do something which his rational mind knows to be wrong. And to make him betray his mind through the coercion of his body is to make him destroy the root of his own survival, his sovereign mind. And so you must not initiate physical force against a man. Said another way, a man's body is controlled by his consciousness. That is, the physical limited resource of the body is, from the moment of being conscious, the first position of a man's consciousness, his mind. To try to put this resource, his body, to an end contradictory to the man's consciousness would be an act of an initiation of an aggression. Aggression being defined as contradictory action on scarce means. Scarce means here being the body. Here, we can see that the fact that man's body is a physical scarce means is what leads to the fact that contradictory action against him is wrong. Because the aggressor and the man cannot use the same body at the same time, so only one of them must have rightful claim over this body, which of course the man himself, because control of his body is control of his mind. The body is not a separate entity from the mind, but the two are in an integrated whole, and to force someone's mind can only be done by forcing someone's body. Thus, the initiation of aggression on a man is always wrong. This principle is the true meaning of individual liberty, as we have proven. Note, in the objectivist tradition, this is called the non-initiation of force. In the anarcho-capitalist tradition, it is called the non-aggression principle. But as I've shown above, they're the same thing really. Simply the point of approach and terminology of proof is different. So now we have shown that only someone who adheres to non-aggression is adhering to individual liberty. And thus we validate our definition that a libertarian is only someone who adheres to the non-aggression principle. Now, why is objectivism necessary to be a libertarian then, in this matter of the word? Well, the nature of man as a rational being, of his mind as being the root of his survival, those are concepts coming from objectivism, and only make sense on an objectivist view of metaphysics and epistemology. Libertarianism cannot stand in a vacuum by itself. Someone cannot just decide to get up one day and say that I will not aggress from now on, I will adhere to non-aggression, without knowing why they must do so. And in knowing why they must do so, they must know, at least in simple terms, this objectivist view. For example, take the case of a white supremacist. Can such a man be a libertarian? On first glance, people might say, sure, why not, as long as he doesn't aggress. But consider this more deeply. This man considers, say, black people as metaphysically evil or inferior. His worldview, his philosophy is dependent upon this fact. What reason does he have to respect their rights? The statement, I hold something to be metaphysically evil, but I will not destroy it, makes no sense. And so, this man will either have to, in the long run, abandon his libertarianism or his white supremacy. Note that this does not mean that there cannot be non-objectivist libertarians, but such people are either 1. Implicitly holding these objectivist concepts without properly knowing it, and are unaware of clashes between these concepts and other contradictory concepts they might hold. A lot of good Christian libertarians who come from an Aquanesian background come to mind. Or they think they are libertarian, but they're really just not, as they use the word and they like the vibes of liberty, but they like the aesthetics of liberty, but they don't adhere to non-aggression. People like Dave Smith and the neo-prags are prime examples. But in strict philosophical terms, libertarianism without these prior objectivist terms is an arbitrary assertion and cannot stand. This is why you see so many flawed libertarians. When defending liberty gets tough, when they have to face public opinion which is against liberty, they cannot fall back on a strong, rational base, and they end up compromising and losing ground to tyrants. Immigration, gun control, flag burning, whatever the issue of the day, you will see these people being unable to defend liberty in the circumstance and try to do nothing but compromise with the enemy. It's because they don't have an answer to these fundamental questions of philosophy that objectivism provides, and that libertarianism has to be based on, and so they fall prey to anybody who has an answer, any answer at all. For example, in the description, I've linked a debate between Dave Smith and Andrew Wilson, in which Dave tries to defend libertarianism but accepts one simple statement by Andrew, that rights are social constructions, and this dooms the entire project. See, if rights are simply a matter of social preference or agreement, then what's the issue with, say, a genocide? The society has determined that the genocided group doesn't have rights, so killing them is completely legitimate. This was the defense given by the German government in the Nuremberg trials, that according to the German law, the Jewish people did not have rights, and thus it was completely legitimate to massacre them. To counter this argument, the opposition had to rely on a concept of natural law, and to win that debate with Andrew, Dave would have to have done the same, would have to have made an argument from the nature of man, which is the objectivist argument. So if you're a libertarian watching this is your call to action to learn objectivism. I suggest starting with The Fountainhead, then Atlas Shrugged, then Objectivism, A Philosophy of Ayn Rand by Leonard Peikoff. That's the most enjoyable route, but of course you can take a different one. I've personally listened to audiobooks and lectures on the ARI channel. In the description, I will give a link to the 1976 lecture series given by Leonard Peikoff, and I do not exaggerate this when I say that nothing was the same after listening to that. You should also listen to the content of my friend Liquid Zulu, who has given an integration between objectivism and anarcho-capitalism, a philosophical achievement which will have both positive outcomes for both of these movements in the future. And also, I would like to thank Liquid Zulu for something else, which is that I made a bet with him on the beginning of this month that I'll put out my first video by the end of this month, and I'm on track to do that. So, and that has been a great motivator. So, thank you.